Good evening once again, YouTube. Hell's Unicorn here again. And as some of you might already know, I'm sort of the bearer of bad tidings today. This morning, about maybe 14 or 15 hours ago, an unsung legend passed on. Legend known to the world as Ronnie James Dio, the king of rock and roll, the second prince of heavy metal, if it were. Title of the reigning prince, I guess, going to Ozzy Osbourne, but sometimes second is best. I can't really put into plain spoken words how this has personally affected me, so I'm just going to really do this by telling all of you a little story. Picture your average run-of-the-mill early teenager, around 8th or 9th grade, public school, doesn't have much direction in his life, kind of coasting from one subject and the other in school, making the cut bare minimum, blending in with the hive, as it were, with a report card full of C's to show for it and not much else. Now picture this guy one day just on a caprice, picking up a guitar, starting to learn how to play, floating around to a couple different bands, playing some old classic rock from the Beatles to AC/DC, maybe a few others here and there, making a little bit of time to get in with the latest trend, throwing together some flannels, growing his hair a little bit longer, listening to grunge music, kind of learning how to play his guitar a little bit, idolizing Kurt Cobain, but basically doing music just because it's something else to fill your day with besides television or video games. And then one day, as chance would have it, this guy finds out that he's not going to be living in the same area that he's lived in for the entirety of his life. For the first time in 15 years, he's going to be moving to a different state, and thus having to start socially over from square one. Doesn't really fare too well at first, is kind of the outcast, as it were. That's usually what the new guy is. Everybody has this sort of myth about the new guy being, the one person that everybody's interested in, but that's horse shit. And then, say a few months into his time at his new school, bumps into a couple guys listening to heavy metal music and say, "You know how to play the guitar?" This guy answers yes. And so they said, "Great, let's hang out and jam sometime." Now, by this point, this guy has learned a few songs here and there, whatever's popular on the radio at the time. Metallica, Megadeth. And on the advice of the others that are in this band that he's joined up with, this guy decides to go to the local record store and do some shopping for the real stuff. The original lineup of Black Sabbath's material. Ozzy, Geezer, Tony Iommi, Bill Ward, the whole 9 yards. His instructions are simple. Pick up a few albums by these guys. It'll completely define your sound, and then we can really get busy and start writing our own material. Now this guy has no idea about this band at all. I mean, he's heard of some of their hit songs like Iron Man or Paranoid, but he's still new to this whole business. So what does he do? He goes in and he purchases a copy of Heaven and Hell, an album that does not have the original singer on it. He then proceeds to listen to this album and gets completely blown away. His entire paradigm has changed. All of a sudden, music is a little more than just something to do in his spare time. Something that he loves doing because he loves what he hears here. It's like seeing true, genuine beauty for the first time in your life. Falling in love for the first time. That's the best way I can describe it. And over time, he decides, I'm going to pick up my guitar and I'm going to learn how to play this stuff. And the rest of the band is pretty perplexed at this guy's obsession with this particular era of Black Sabbath. Even more so perplexed at the fact that this guy is now seeking out other material that was done by the singer, who this band views as some kind of outsider, some kind of afterthought. It's not Black Sabbath because Ozzy's not in it. But this guy has a different take on it. And so he puts in hours and hours teaching himself how to play the songs. And then he starts singing along with them, trying to teach himself how to sing the same way this guy sings. At first, he doesn't really have the range to pull it off, but he keeps trying and trying anyway until he finally forces himself to hit all the notes, which are incredibly high compared to the range that he has at the time. And then, as chance would have it, like with all rock bands and metal bands in high school, things don't really last, band breaks up. Guy goes off to college, decides, something, I think I'll get a degree in classical music and pursue this further and make this not just a hobby, but the hobby, while I do whatever day job I have to do in order to keep the bills paid. Fast forward about a decade later, and you have somebody who is basically engrossed in the entire genre of heavy metal. Can't stop listening to it. Not just the original genre that cropped up in the early 80s and was sort of defined as being mainstream at the time, although now obviously it's not. Picture a guy who listens to it all. Death metal, black metal, gothic metal, thrash metal, doom metal, power metal, progressive metal. If it's got something and then metal afterwards, he's listening to it. He's got varying tastes. Some of this stuff doesn't appeal to him as much as others do, but he listens to it constantly. And then he decides, something, I think I'm going to try to make this my life. I'm going to try to record this stuff, try to see if I can get other people to hear it. And that's basically where I'm at now. That's who I was, and it's basically who I am. It's probably not the most exciting of stories, but it's basically mine. This story was basically shaped by the person who just passed on today. And it's really difficult to just really say how empty things are going to be now that he's gone. In the coming weeks, better words will probably come to my mind, but that's basically all I can really put together about this right now. But for those of you out there who have not heard of any of his music or who may have heard some of it and dismissed it, check it out or give it another listen. Because the person that passed on today, Ronnie James Dio, he was a legend. Even though most people, probably because of MTV and Rolling Stone not giving a shit, might not know it at this current point in time. But they should. And if I have anything to do about it, they will. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.